Let me get my screen up. I've got a little presentation for you. Okay, so tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about autism, vulnerabilities, and supports. I'm Bird. I use they, them pronouns. I'm autistic. I'm a master's student in anthropology at San Francisco State. I research autistic vulnerabilities, stigma, and discrimination. I run a nonprofit called Bay Area Autism Collective, which offers peer support to autistic adults. And I also have an emerging consulting business called Neurodiversity Labs, which expands DEI initiatives to include neurodivergence. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the neurodiversity movement, which originated in the 1990s as an extension of the autism movement. Movements are great in that they can mobilize identities into political unifiers. Autistic people have found the neurodiversity movement to be a galvanizing force that brings us together under common goals. So what are some of those goals? One is self-determination and autonomy for autistic people. Another is to improve society's understanding of autism through education and inclusion. Another one is to end stigma and discrimination of autistic people and autistic behaviors. Tonight, I'm mainly going to be talking about autism and victimization. This is because people with developmental disabilities are at heightened risk for maltreatment, and autistic people in particular experience extraordinarily high rates of victimization. On top of that, 63% of autistic children have communication deficits, which can prevent self-advocacy and reporting. So there's several theories about why autistic people are so vulnerable to mistreatment. Today, I'm going to go over some possible contributors to that prevalence of abuse and how those within autistic people's support system can assist in reducing our risk. We're going to talk about a few different types of victimization. The main ones are stigma and discrimination, bullying, emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. Stigma is defined as the situation of the individual who is disqualified from full social acceptance. Now, autistic adults experience high rates of bullying due to stigma and discrimination. In fact, 44% of autistic people experience bullying by their peers. Emotional abuse is also very prevalent within the autistic population. Children exhibiting more prominent autistic characteristics are more vulnerable to mistreatment. Challenges with social awareness further amplify our susceptibility. In fact, in one study, among a cohort of individuals displaying autistic traits, women with the greatest degree of such traits were found to have encountered significant instances of physical or emotional abuse during their childhood, 23.9% compared to 14.3% of women with the least amount of autistic traits. Physical and sexual abuse are also very prominent. One study of autistic college students found that 8.2% had unwanted physical or sexual contact within the preceding 5 years, while only 4.6% of non-autistic students had. 9 out of 10 autistic women have been victims of sexual abuse. More than half of those incidents occur below the age of consent. In fact, in a study of women with autistic traits, those with the most autistic traits were almost twice as likely to have been sexually abused in childhood than those with the fewest autistic traits. There are multiple contributing factors. One of them is interpersonal challenges, and an aspect of that are difficulties picking up on social cues. One study showed that autistic individuals exhibited limited brain activity in regions linked to interpreting others' thoughts, actions, and intentions. Autistic brains might fail to identify subtle social signals that hint at potential threats. Brain regions responsible for gaze analysis, attention, emotional processing, and understanding mental states can be faulty. So autistic people might not pick up on signals that a person may be a danger to them. Another contributing factor is relational challenges. One aspect of this is alexithymia. 55% of autistic people are alexithymic compared to about 10% of allistic people. Allistic is another word for non-autistic. Alexithymia is difficulty in identifying, conveying, and understanding emotions, vocal connotations, and facial expressions. Alexithymic people have higher rates of stressor-related anxiety than those without. Yet another contributing factor are personal challenges. One aspect of that is interoception. Interoception is the processing of internal sensory stimuli and is closely linked to emotional awareness. People with good interoception can identify and categorize bodily sensations, such as pain and discomfort, but many neurodivergent people actually have faulty interoception. Brain-body disconnects can confuse autistic people's perceptions of what is right and wrong with their body. Yet another contributing factor is social isolation. A 2009 survey of autistic young adults found that 25% had no contact with friends for at least a year, and 33% did not participate in any community activities. To mitigate loneliness, autistic people may accept attention from those who treat them poorly. So, are autistic people unable to recognize red flags, or are predators drawn to their vulnerability? Well, the truth is both. So how can we reduce the risk of victimization? Therapists, educators, and parents can help. Can start by recognizing signs of maltreatment. Research has shown that autistic children who have experienced abuse may have heightened disruptive behaviors. Maltreatment is associated with increased hyperactivity, aggression, and meltdowns. We can also start by rejecting behavioral therapies. Behavioral interventions groom autistic people for abuse by teaching compliance. Autistic people are taught to listen and obey without questions. Compliance training desensitizes autistic people's awareness of their intuition, which may impair their ability to notice red flags in others. Many autistic people consider behavioral therapies like ABA to be conversion therapy for autistic people. Applied behavioral analysis is one of the most well-funded and widely used therapies for autistic people. So what's the problem with it? Well, to start, ABA addresses the child's behaviors, not their needs. It blurs boundaries for autistic children by teaching them that their boundaries are unimportant. By teaching autistic people to mask their autistic traits, ABA compels them to hide their true selves for rewards and acceptance. ABA rejects autistic people in their natural state in favor of neurotypical standards. So who makes the rules? Well, in applied behavioral analysis, ABA clinicians are the arbiters of what is socially appropriate. Socially appropriate for whom and why? Is the desired behavior aligned with autistic culture or allistic culture? Does the autistic person have an opportunity to give consent or input? The fact of the matter is that ABA ignores the value and protections of intrinsic motivation. How does this happen? To start, ABA techniques encourage a child to implicitly trust a stranger, making them more susceptible to predatory individuals. The ABA process teaches the child to suppress their innate judgment of character in favor of external incentives. Learned behavior requires the child to conceal one's true feelings and instincts. So children might respond affirmatively when they would prefer to decline, but they aren't allowed to, heightening their vulnerability to potential sexual and physical abuse later in life. What are the costs of discouraging autistic behaviors? Preventing or punishing autistic behaviors and sensory sensitivity to daily stimuli is a significant stressor for autistic children. Compliance conditioning may engender a traumatic conditioning process due to the stress it creates. But that's not all. Traumatic conditioning can impact how an autistic child manages their emotions and arousal levels. When their ability to regulate their emotions is compromised, it increases the chances of the child experiencing traumatic stress and other unfavorable mental health issues. So, adverse mental health makes it even more challenging for them to control their emotions. And then the cycle of stress into poor mental health makes it difficult for the person to handle future stressors, dangers, and predators, which they may encounter more frequently because of their mounting emotional instability and difficulties with social interactions. We want to teach autistic children to use their voices, to say no, to trust their gut, to recognize red flags in others, to unmask and be themselves, to practice bodily autonomy, to know and use consent, to develop boundaries, and to express themselves. Power dynamics are a big part, since autistic people are already predisposed to be victimized due to their marginalized place in society. It is up to those around them to be allies and promote skills that will carry them safely through life. People in positions of authority have immense power over the development of an autistic person's self-esteem, self-awareness, and the ability to know when they are being mistreated. However, when misused, that power could make the autistic person even more vulnerable. When you work with autistic people, which approach will you choose? Thanks a lot for listening.